So this is actually the first cardiovascular kidney metabolic syndrome guideline. It expands upon and retires the primary 2013 AHA-ACC the Obesity Society guideline on the management of just overweight and obesity. And what this does is actually focus on the broader multi-system consequences of excess and dysfunctional adiposity. It really builds upon a construct that was introduced in 2023 by the American Heart Association of cardiovascular kidney metabolic health, which reflects the fact that metabolic factors such as obesity and diabetes are closely intertwined with chronic kidney disease and cardiovascular disease, and the fact that this is really becoming the predominant form of cardiovascular risk in the population is also a major determinant of premature mortality and also disparities in cardiovascular disease. And really, it's increasingly the case that a lot of our therapeutics span across these various systems: metabolic, cardiovascular, and kidney. So these guidelines really equip us to better identify individuals with these challenges, to address the kind of component aspects of CKM syndrome holistically, and to think about what our care models need to look like to really support multi-system care for individuals who are affected by these challenges. So I think the big changes to think about here. First of all, as a broader clinical society, there is increasingly a move away from thinking about obesity as just a cosmetic issue or an individual failing, and thinking about this as a more systematic challenge that has multi-system consequences for health. The number two piece is that we have a growing appreciation of this very close interconnection among things like obesity, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and various forms of cardiovascular disease. And then I think the therapeutics that we have in place are now crossing across our subspecialty silos. So whereas, many years ago, I could focus on cardiovascular medication, the kidney doctor might focus on kidney care, the endocrinologist might focus on their endocrinologic considerations or metabolic care. It's really clearly the case that a lot of the therapeutics and a lot of the people we're seeing really span across these various systems. So thinking about them in an isolated fashion is becoming antiquated and is not doing justice to addressing the growing burden of risk associated with these conditions. And I just want to reemphasize that, again, the data demonstrate that over the past 25 years, this interplay and the relating clusters of metabolic, kidney, and cardiovascular factors that come together are increasingly driving cardiovascular risk. It's changing cardiovascular mortality curves in the population. So whereas we saw continuous declines for 5 decades previously, we've now seen first a plateau and now an uptick in cardiovascular mortality that really is reflecting this growing clinical and public health challenge. So this guideline is really, I think, an important attempt to start to address these gaps and meet the clinical and public health challenges that we're facing today. So PREVENT is a very important advance that actually has its origins in this cardiovascular kidney metabolic health initiative. So as this initiative was developing, it was clear that our existing risk calculators, the pooled cohort equation, was really not going to fully meet the needs of this population in a few different ways. First of all, the pooled cohort equation was focusing just on atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, where we could see that heart failure was really becoming a major issue that was more and more on the rise. Second, the pooled cohort equations historically were largely focused on identifying a population who would be suitable for statin use. In later years, more focused on hypertension as well. But now our armamentarium of preventive therapies has expanded. So we needed to be able to inform these additional therapies that prevent cardiovascular disease by affecting metabolic and or kidney health. Additionally, we know that we're seeing individuals presenting earlier and earlier with cardiovascular disease as a result of this growing burden of CKM syndrome. So there was a need to change our age horizon and move earlier, but also to think about risk in the short term and long term. So this PREVENT really does a lot of these various things. It basically expands our focus in terms of outcomes beyond ASCVD to also consider heart failure and total cardiovascular disease, which is ASCVD and heart failure. It also focuses on individuals not just at age 40, but starting at age 30. So 10 years earlier, all the way down to age 79, focusing on a broader group of individuals for whom we're predicting adverse cardiovascular outcomes. And particularly for young adults, it focuses not just, and middle-aged adults, not just on 10-year risk horizon, but also on a 30-year risk horizon, and includes a lot of these various CKM syndrome components, as well as a measure of social determinants of health, a place-based measure of that called the Social Deprivation Index within the model as well. An important additional consideration is that the pooled cohort equations, because they were largely utilizing some older data, they tended to overpredict risk quite considerably, so almost by a factor of 2, and that was shown in many different studies. Whereas now, using more contemporary data in a more inclusive and larger population, moving from the tens of thousands to 6 million individuals, the prevent equation actually has what we call calibration predicted to observe risk that's about 1-to-1. So what you're predicting is actually what you're seeing in this contemporary population. So important advances. And the guidelines that have come out over the last year, the hypertension guidelines, the dyslipidemia guidelines, and now the CKM guidelines, have all now adopted PREVENT as the primary risk prediction tool to utilize for risk stratification and for kind of considering where we might prioritize some of our therapies with a focus on absolute risk reduction. The challenges that are still ahead of us. Number one, it needs to be adopted into our electronic medical records so that this is something that's easily accessible for clinicians, and that's something that's in process. And I suspect within the next couple of months, we'll see this fully adopted into Epic, for example, to allow for that. Number two, there's going to be a need for individuals to get a little bit more used to not just having one outcome that we're focused on. So, for example, whereas the hypertension guidelines and the CKM guidelines focus on total cardiovascular disease as the primary metric for thinking about how to allocate therapy, in the dyslipidemia guidelines, a focus on prediction of ASCVD is the focus there. There's also some focus on heart failure to identify individuals in the population for screening for pre-heart failure. So those different metrics are going to take a little bit of getting used to for individuals in the population, but hopefully with adoption into electronic medical records and more continuing education, these are things that could be overcome, and more importantly, would better meet the needs of our population. Yeah, so that is very much the hope. So, obviously there are multi-system consequences that result from CKM syndrome. It's not just, cardiovascular, kidney, and metabolic conditions. It's brain health. It's, lung challenges with pulmonary hypertension. It's the liver with cirrhosis and need for transplantation. A variety of challenges can occur. But at the end of the day, the principal clinical consequence is premature cardiovascular mortality and a high burden of cardiovascular events. That is what is leading the day. That is what is driving outcomes. And that's what's driving a lot of healthcare costs for this population. So that's really the primary focus. And we want to identify people. We know that when we get to these later stages of CKM syndrome and you already have advanced metabolic and kidney disease and cardiovascular disease, it's almost impossible to keep those individuals out of the hospital. It's really hard to keep them healthy. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of medications, a lot of needs. But the reality is that CKM syndrome follows a very predictable trajectory and course. So its natural history tends to start with excess and or dysfunctional adipose tissue, which we define as stage 1. Over time, this will lead to the development of metabolic risk factors and or chronic kidney disease, which we describe as stage 2. And the interplay among those factors tends to lead to eventually subclinical cardiovascular disease or very high-risk chronic kidney disease, which is stage 3. And then that's the precursor to clinical cardiovascular disease, which is stage 4. The goal is to identify people earlier in those in that spectrum of disease. So to identify people in that stage 1 and stage 2, and to prevent progression to those later stages, at least to promote awareness and to start kind of therapeutic approaches. So there's a heavy emphasis on identifying people, thinking about life course prevention for both adults and youth, and also focusing on CKM stage prevention of progression to those later stages. The other thing that's a big focus is that in those early stages, particularly stage 1, 2, and some individuals even in stage 3, there is the potential to regress in CKM stages, to go in the opposite direction with substantial lifestyle change or weight loss with the various modalities that are available to us. So we do want to kind of promote awareness for these things that historically are largely under-recognized, and the support not getting to those later stages and improving overall outcomes in the population. I would say that both of these things are important. So if you look at the epidemiologic data, there's no question that not only are CKM stages a principal determinant of premature mortality, but progression over time along those stages is the biggest predictor of who's going to progress to end-stage injury and also to early mortality. So we certainly know that there's an importance to better recognizing people earlier in these stages, preventing progression of disease. There's no question about that. But it's also important to recognize that there are high risk individuals who, with existing disease, who are not being adequately treated. And a lot of that also means that we need to be identifying these CKM risk factors among individuals who already have had established cardiovascular disease or a cardiovascular event, and using that to optimize secondary prevention. So I think it's not a choice between one or the other. I think both are very important, but I do think that we're not currently doing an adequate job in either category. So I think there's certainly a lot of progress to be made on the prevention side, but we can also optimize our management of individuals with existing cardiovascular disease as well. It's very clear that we are identifying people way too late, and under-recognized risk is a major challenge. For chronic kidney disease, the statistics generally say that about 90% of individuals are unaware of their diagnosis. So it's no question that we need to identify people earlier in this spectrum. There's a clear focus within the CKM construct for systematic testing based on your CKM stage. So less frequent and less aggressive testing for those individuals who are in stage 0 who don't have CKM syndrome, a little bit more frequent in stage 1 in the kind of 2 to 3 year time frame, and then in those individuals who are stage 2 and above, who already have established risk factors, yearly assessments to identify new risk and to make sure we're optimizing the existing factors. This by itself, I think, will be very important for improving awareness among clinicians and among patients, and to start to adopt some of these evidence-based therapies earlier in a way that can really maximize care for individuals and prevent just waiting until the late stages when things are so much more challenging to handle.